お前で最後か？真面目にやれ。殺すぞ。我はお前を殺す。
Anime, Classroom for Heroes. In this first episode, we are shown two figures engaged in a battle in a desolate land. They are a hero and a demon king who will determine the fate of this world. The demon king chants a meteor spell aimed at the hero. Meanwhile, the hero merely takes a small stone and throws it with all his might using magic. The small stone successfully shatters the giant meteor into pieces. The hero asks the demon king to fight seriously. The demon king agrees to end this battle immediately. He unleashes his full power to attack. Meanwhile, the hero uses his ultimate move, the Dragon Annihilator, a technique that destroys dragons with 5 swords. Their movements are so fast and powerful that they even cause the surrounding land to crumble. Despite fighting with their full strength, both of them remain undefeated. However, they are now extremely exhausted. The hero's black hair has turned white. In the end, they continue to advance, gasping for breath, and they stab each other's bodies. Thus, both of them fall down. The scene then shifts to a castle that serves as an academy. There is a boy dressed differently from the others. The boy has unusual hair, with the right side white and the left side black. The boy is impressed by the students greeting each other. He is determined to find friends and become ordinary. Apparently, the boy is a transfer student. In the school hallway, the boy greets every student he sees. Some students are curious about him, and the boy approaches them quickly. He introduces himself to them. His name is Blade. The 4 students that Blade approached also introduce themselves. There's Kasim, Clay, Jessica, and Claire. Blade says he came here to find friends. Claire offers the 4 of them to become his friends. Blade is overjoyed because he has successfully made 4 friends. His goal is to have 100 friends. Soon, a girl with red hair approaches Blade because he is being too noisy. The girl is Arnest Flaming, one of the top-ranking students commonly referred to as Empress. Blade doesn't care about that and instead introduces himself to Arnest as well. Arnest becomes angry, especially since Blade's face looks unfamiliar. Claire explains that Blade is a transfer student. However, Arnest does not believe it. Rosewood Academy is a special school for people who want to become heroes and protect the world. It's impossible for a student to join in the middle of the semester. Blade says that he doesn't care much about being a hero, he just wants to find friends. Arnest becomes even angrier upon hearing this. Then, Blade suddenly remembers that he has to meet the headmaster. He asks Arnest to take him there reluctantly. They finally arrived in front of the headmaster's office door. As they entered, Arnest immediately knelt down, not expecting to see the figure before her. Blade simply stood and spoke familiarly with that person. The man standing before them was the king of this kingdom. Blade himself already knew that the man was the king. The king said that he had heard a lot about Arnest from the previous headmaster. As he stated, from now on, the king would be the headmaster of this academy. Upon hearing this, Arnest praised him, honored to be taught directly by a great warrior. However, for now, the king only had business with Blade. He asked Arnest to leave the room. When they were outside, Arnest became angry again because Blade was acting familiar with the king. In fact, Blade himself didn't know why the king was there. The king said he wanted Blade's power to return. However, Blade just wanted to be an ordinary person. The king even went as far as changing the academy's curriculum. Blade felt that it was unnecessary. Besides, the demon king was no longer there. According to the king's report, the powers of the hero and the demon king were lost when they exchanged attacks. However, the king believed that his power could rise again. A few moments later, Blade met Arnest again. He wondered why Blade was here when this was the arena for the top-ranking class. It turned out that after taking the lower-ranking class exam, Blade was told to come here. He even showed his top-ranking class emblem. Arnest clearly didn't believe that a transfer student suddenly entered the top-ranking class. Arnest accused him of bribing or using a backdoor entrance. Setting aside those accusations, Blade, as usual, introduced himself to everyone present. Arnest was angry because he wasn't being listened to. However, Blade said that he was listening while patting Arnest's head. Because of that, Arnest became embarrassed and swung her sword. Blade was able to easily dodge her attack, but the impact of the attack was powerful enough to erode the arena wall. Shortly after, a girl with white hair approached Blade and Arnest to inform them that class was about to begin. Blade introduced himself once again. The girl was unsure of how to react. According to Arnest, she just needed to introduce herself in return. The girl agreed and introduced herself as Sophie. Still feeling uncertain, Arnest asked the teacher for permission to test Blade's abilities before the lesson began. Arnest wanted to test him by attacking magical metal. According to Arnest, everyone in the top-ranking class could scratch the magical metal. So, Blade had to make a stronger impact if he wanted to be recognized in this class. Arnest said that the top-ranking class existed in a different dimension. Blade asked back how many dimensions were different. Arnest didn't expect Blade to ask that, so she simply answered randomly, saying 3 dimensions. Blade then knew what technique he would use. The other students recognized the stances created by Blade. Then, Blade used the Dragon Eater, a technique that destroys dragons with 2 swords. Not only did he scratch the metal, but the attacked magical metal also completely shattered. His attack continued, destroying part of the arena wall. After witnessing his ability, Arnest became curious about who Blade really was. He answered that he was just an ordinary person, and that was one of the reasons he came to this academy. During lunch break, Blade approached Arnest, who was eating alone. Blade invited others to sit at their table, but they hesitated because Arnest was there. It seemed that she was feared by other students. Despite that, Blade thanked Arnest. As a transfer student, Blade felt grateful to have found a friend like Arnest. Arnest herself did not expect to be seen that way by him. However, Blade said that they were friends, especially since they were eating together. Arnest became shy and accepted Blade's statement. It was already nighttime, and Arnest had just returned to her room. Earlier, Arnest seemed to disregard Blade's words. However, when she was alone, she was actually overjoyed because it was the first time she had made a friend. While she was feeling happy, Arnest suddenly felt a great fire from within her. Unable to control it, she immediately fainted. Blade took her to the academy's infirmary. When they arrived, the nurse there said it was beyond her capabilities. She could handle ordinary illnesses or injuries, but dealing with magical diseases or curses was different. Sometime later, Arnest finally regained consciousness. Blade helped her walk because she was still weak. However, when they reached a group of other students, Arnest insisted on walking alone. In addition, she asked Blade not to tell anyone that she had fainted. Later that night, Blade went to a room that appeared to be secret. There were many robot guards there, but Blade defeated them all. Afterward, he opened a door by inserting a crystal. The door led to a modern room that looked like a database. Blade searched for information about something in Rosewood Academy, specifically information about Arnest's sword, Asmodeus. After obtaining the desired information, he planned to talk to Arnest the next day. Blade revealed that he knew the secret of Arnest's sword. The sword had its own consciousness and could grant great power to its owner. However, currently, Arnest was an imperfect owner. Blade asked why her condition was like that. Reluctantly, Arnest had to tell him. When she was 6 years old, she touched the cursed magic sword kept by the Flaming family. The bloodthirsty will of the sword tried to take over her body. Since then, Arnest had always resisted it. Her hair, which was originally black, turned red because of it. Even now, Arnest still often heard whispers from Asmodeus, but Asmodeus itself did not control her. Arnest knew there was a way to solve this problem, which was to convince the sword that she was its rightful owner. However, Arnest was worried that a bloodthirsty demon would be born if she failed. If that were to happen, Blade said he would defeat the demon. Moreover, he believed that Arnest would succeed. After that, Arnest challenged the sword, Asmodeus, to establish a pact. For that, she had to be tested first. A fire tornado formed around Arnest. Currently, Arnest was fighting Asmodeus mentally. Outside the tornado, fire demons started causing havoc. However, they were no match for Blade. Meanwhile, Arnest was determined to win, especially after being trusted by Blade. The fire tornado grew bigger, but it did not intimidate Blade at all. He believed that Arnest could pass her test. Shortly after, the fire tornado vanished, and Arnest fell from it. She stood up again and successfully conquered the Asmodeus sword. After overcoming her long-standing problem, Arnest slightly changed her appearance and became more cheerful. Other students were even more amazed by her presence. This is the end of episode 1. Continuing to episode 2, Blade is currently sparring with 2 students simultaneously. However, he keeps evading their attacks and appears not to take the fight seriously. Observing this, Arnest reprimands Blade, stating that it is impolite to avert one's gaze during a fight. However, instead of responding to Arnest's advice, Blade becomes distracted, feeling that Arnest seems somewhat different. Nevertheless, when asked what is different, Blade has no idea at all. Arnest becomes slightly disappointed that Blade doesn't notice her hair. Afterward, since Blade is feeling bored at the moment, Arnest asks him to supervise Sophie's training. For some reason, Sophie has always been training alone. When given an order, she will indeed obey. However, Sophie has never done anything according to her own desires. Interestingly, the other day Sophie mentioned her own name to Blade. So, perhaps Blade can help her. Subsequently, Blade approaches Sophie and tells her that he came because Arnest instructed him to. Sophie asks if it was an order. Blade becomes somewhat confused about how to respond, but essentially, he wants to assist Sophie. However, Sophie says she can only fight barehanded because that's the only thing she was taught. Blade is willing to teach her sword techniques, not as an order, but because he considers her a friend. Since it's not an order, Blade won't force her. Sophie doesn't seem to mind this offer. However, just as Blade is about to start, the bell for break time rings. In the next lesson, they finally get to practice swordsmanship together. In the first attempt, Sophie is unable to even scratch the enchanted metal and gets thrown back. Blade asks her to focus her energy on the sword and consider it as an extension of her body. After that, Blade demonstrates by effortlessly slicing through the enchanted metal as if it were paper. With that somewhat ambiguous explanation, somehow Sophie manages to understand it. After a few hours, Sophie is now able to strike the enchanted metal with the sword without any issues. With that, Blade concludes their training for now. Suddenly, Sophie asks if by doing this, she can defeat Arnest. Honestly, Blade is not sure either. If it's just these techniques alone, it seems challenging. Then, she throws her sword and assumes a mount position towards Blade, stating that this technique is much stronger. Although she says so, Sophie mentions that she wants to be taught something new the next day. Blade is currently in the school's headmaster's office, asking about Blade's school life. The headmaster is glad to hear that Blade has friends, considering Blade has been a hero since the age of 3. The headmaster asks Blade about the name of his friend. There are actually several people, but Blade responds that he has been hanging out with Sophie lately. The headmaster already suspected that Blade would be interested in her. The headmaster mentions that Sophie is very strong, and Blade agrees. However, it turns out that Sophie is still not perfect. According to the headmaster, if she were perfect, her abilities would surpass Blade's. Blade doesn't understand what the headmaster means by that. The headmaster suspects that Blade already knows that Sophie is the subject of the artificial hero project. The project leaders believe that they could create someone equivalent to a hero. Using forbidden techniques lost in the past, they used human forms as a basis to create artificial hero abilities. Furthermore, they duplicated it repeatedly and enhanced its abilities. Sophie's full name is Sophidia Femto. Femto itself means 12. In other words, Sophie is currently the 12th duplication. All this time, Sophie has been treated as a research subject. Nevertheless, the headmaster assures Blade not to worry because he has destroyed the organization. While saving Sophie, the headmaster declared that Sophie is now free. However, Sophie simply asks if it is an order. The headmaster is confident that Sophie continues to behave that way until now. After hearing all that, Blade immediately leaves the room to find Sophie. He believes that Sophie's suffering is caused by her existence. He wants to restore Sophie's normal life. Unfortunately, Blade himself doesn't know what normal looks like. Firstly, Blade meets the nurse at the health center and asks what is considered normal for young people his age. The nurse teases him a bit, saying she will teach him the beauty of youth. However, Blade quickly assumes that youth is the answer. Next, he goes to Leonard to ask about the meaning of youth. Leonard himself is also confused about how to answer, but when discussing youth, love is undoubtedly the answer. Just like before, Blade immediately assumes that love is the answer. Then, Blade asks Claire and Jessica about the meaning of love. They didn't expect Blade to ask such a question. With some embarrassment, Claire answers that love usually involves dating. Once again, Blade jumps to the conclusion that dating is the answer. Lastly, he goes to Arnest's room and asks what dating means and what should be done. Arnest answers that typical dating activities involve having a conversation, strolling around the city, and going shopping. However, Arnest misunderstands that Blade is asking her out on a date. Satisfied with the answer, Blade leaves Arnest and says he is going on a date. Arnest is confused, but then she realizes that Blade wants to ask someone else out on a date. Without any shame, Blade barges into the women's changing room and straightforwardly asks Sophie out on a date. As usual, Sophie asks if it is an order. Of course, it is not an order. Blade considers it to be something very important. Sophie agrees to go on a date with him. The next day, Blade arrives early at the designated meeting place and is currently waiting for Sophie. From a distance, Arnest, Claire, and Jessica are observing Blade. The clock strikes exactly 10 o'clock, and Sophie arrives on time. Blade has learned a lot in preparation for this day. He has even written down a minute-by-minute schedule of activities. Arnest and the others feel that his plan is too detailed, more like a mission than a date. As Blade reads his plan for too long, he ends up messing up his own schedule by a few minutes. Sophie suggests that they just leave right away. Unexpectedly, they hold each other's arms like a couple. Arnest feels that their actions are too indecent. However, Jessica thinks it's still normal. Amidst the commotion, they lose track of Blade and Sophie. During their date, Blade and Sophie walk around the city, eat ice cream together, and enjoy the view from a bridge. On the bridge, there's an attraction where they can feed the fish. Sophie expresses her interest in trying it. They buy a box of fish food and pour it all into the river. Unbeknownst to them, the food falls on Arnest, Claire, and Jessica, who are hiding underwater. Later, they go to an arcade. There, they choose to play a boxing game. However, their strength is too powerful, and the game machine immediately breaks. Blade and Sophie simply leave afterward. Arnest and the others apologize to the arcade owner for Blade and Sophie's actions. Next, they arrive at a cafe and order drinks with couple-like straws. As they start sipping their drinks, Sophie asks Blade to come closer because she's having trouble sipping. Blade leans in until their cheeks touch. They are completely unaware that Arnest, Claire, and Jessica are at the next table. And of course, Arnest, witnessing the intimacy between Blade and Sophie, feels extremely embarrassed to the point of almost going insane. Unbeknownst to them, Blade and Sophie have once again disappeared from there. After that, they proceed to the next item on their schedule. Unfortunately, they are running a bit late from the predetermined time. Sophie suggests taking a shortcut instead. They then swiftly jump from one building to another. The sun has set, and they have reached their final destination, the legendary fountain. Blade heard about this place from others, but he doesn't understand what makes it legendary. Sophie feels the same way. Sophie smiles slightly and mentions that today has been very enjoyable. However, she wonders why Blade went through all this trouble. With a serious expression, Blade answers that it's because Sophie is his friend. Sophie has heard that friends don't keep secrets. This statement causes Blade to panic a bit. However, Sophie meant that she herself still has secrets. Sophie finally opens up and reveals her story. She explains that she is different from regular humans. She was born as an artificial hero. An imperfect research subject. Sophie was bestowed with the power of an artificial hero. She demonstrates this by touching a staircase, causing it to twist like a worm. Just like a genuine hero's power, Sophie can defy the laws of physics. Another example is her ability to manipulate gravity and time. However, her control is not perfect. Currently, Sophie can only use her power for 10 seconds. Her full name is Sophidia Femto. In other words, she is the 12th duplication of a girl named Sophidia. The final experiment of the Artificial Hero Project. After hearing Sophie reveal all her secrets, Blade also wants to disclose his secret. Blade confesses that he is the hero. More precisely, a former hero. He has lost his powers now. Since their first meeting, Sophie has always felt something familiar within Blade. Blade apologizes for everything Sophie has experienced and assures her that he doesn't mind if she hates him. After all, Sophie was born with that cursed power because of the existence of the hero. Truthfully, Blade himself never desired to be a hero. However, because he could save many people, he felt compelled to do so. He has been fighting since the age of 3. Although he hasn't always been successful in saving others, people would get angry if someone couldn't be saved. Sophie immediately embraces Blade, who is shedding tears. Sophie recounts that after being saved by the king, she wanted to find her true self. During that time, she saw many people and cities that were helped by the hero. Sophie asks Blade to take more pride in his accomplishments. Blade feels that it's impossible. Sophie doesn't force Blade, But it's clear that she is proud to be born as an artificial hero. She even wants to become like Blade. After hearing all of this, Blade accepts himself as a hero and no longer regrets it. Holding hands, they make a promise that this secret is only for the two of them. This is the end of episode 2. Continuing with episode 3, as usual, Blade was enjoying a large portion of curry. Arnest reminded him not to eat messily. Sophie then wiped Blade's mouth without hesitation, which made Arnest embarrassed. Thanks to the incident from yesterday, Claire and Jessica became closer to Arnest. They even wanted to have a meal together. Not only the two of them, but Kasim and Clay also joined for the meal. For some reason, the four of them were not wearing their usual uniforms. Jessica asked Blade for his opinion on her revealing outfit. Arnest then remembered that they had moved up to the top-ranked class starting today, so they were not wearing their usual uniforms. Blade commented that Jessica's outfit must be making her feel cold. Trying to seek attention, Leonard introduced himself to Claire and Jessica. Later, Arnest also remembered the news that the headmaster brought demon beasts to the school. However, Blade considered it a normal piece of news. Suddenly, all the students felt a strong tremor coming from nearby. It was probably caused by the demon beast they had just talked about. The demon beast that shook the school turned out to be a golden yellow dragon. The guards panicked and immediately called for the headmaster, as they believed only he could fight the dragon. Blade went to where the dragon was, holding a plate of curry in his hand. Fearlessly, Blade approached and jumped, knocking the dragon on the head to make it quiet. Other students were left speechless watching Blade defeat the dragon barehanded. Blade mentioned that the dragon was just a child and probably scared because it was brought here. He even offered his curry to the dragon. Blade then realized that the other students found it unbelievable that he could defeat the dragon. While still in confusion, the dragon behind Blade suddenly emitted a bright light and transformed into a human child. When Blade turned around, he was suddenly hugged by the child who called him father. Blade was unaware that the dragon had transformed into this child. Arnest kept telling him that the dragon had transformed, but Blade didn't believe it until Sophie said the same thing, which made him trust her instantly. Arnest got annoyed because Blade only believed it when Sophie said it. The child kept calling Blade father and asked to be hugged. He said he called Blade that way because his punch earlier was incredibly powerful. That night, Blade and the child were bathing together. The child informed Blade that her name was Chu Hullen and she wanted to know the meaning of that name. Blade replied that it was the name of a very strong warrior who always kept his promises. Shortly after, Arnest's voice was heard as she suddenly entered. She was embarrassed to see Blade bathing. She came to provide information about demon beasts, especially dragons. They were a species that sought power. When defeated, their bodies would perish, but a part of their soul wouldn't disappear. Instead, it would become a piece of information. Then, that soul would transform into another individual and mimic the appearance of the creature that defeated them. Blade began to understand why Chu transformed into a human child. Arnest learned that the child's name was Chu. Suddenly, Chu emerged from the curtain, revealing her naked body to Arnest. Arnest couldn't believe that Blade was bathing with a child, and she immediately kicked him in the face with all her strength. The next day, Arnest was still annoyed by Chu, who continuously stuck to Blade. Chu wanted Blade to feed her curry. She said she could eat on her own, but the food given directly by her father would taste much better. Not only that, Chu also informed Blade that every morning he should greet her with kisses. Later, Blade and the others were in the top-ranked class arena. Coincidentally, Blade saw Chu passing by, so he invited her to join the training. Chu happily approached him. Suddenly, Kasim, Clay, Claire, and Jessica approached Blade. They said the teacher gave an order to form groups. Since they had just entered the top-ranked class, they wanted to know more details about it first. Chu looked a bit down as she was no longer getting attention from Blade. Jessica mentioned that she specialized in espionage, so she asked for student recommendations to form a group. Blade suggested her to team up with Sophie, and the other three decided to group up with Blade. When Blade wanted to invite Chu to join as well, he realized Chu was no longer there. In the evening, Chu was walking around the school alone. She then saw the students from the lower-ranked class practicing. Those students noticed Chu coming again for the umpteenth time and invited her to join the practice too. However, Chu didn't respond and considered them unsuitable for her. She immediately ran off and coincidentally bumped into Blade. Chu said she was hungry. As usual, Blade invited her to have some curry. After eating to her heart's content, Chu fell asleep on Blade's bed while holding a doll. Then, Arnest knocked on the door of Blade's room, so they decided to talk outside. Blade explained that a dragon would be stepped on by its parents when it was born. If someone stronger than the dragon appeared, it would be considered as the dragon's parent. Since Chu considered Blade as her parent, she must have been alone since birth. Blade knew that they couldn't always act like a father and child, but if it wasn't like that, Chu would truly be alone. Arnest understood how heavy it was to always be alone, and she also understood Blade's feelings of wanting to take care of Chu. Arnest then called Sophie, who had been eavesdropping on them, and Sophie felt worried too. However, after listening to their conversation, she seemed to be calmer. When Blade returned to his room, Chu was no longer there, and the window was open. He finally found Chu daydreaming on the room's rooftop. Chu said she felt calm when looking at the moon. There were 2 moons in this world, one big and one small. Chu considered the big moon as her parent and the small one as her child. She always looked at that moon when she was still alone. Suddenly, Blade asked if Chu wanted to have friends. But Chu said that dragons didn't need to gather like humans. The next day, Blade went to the headmaster's office. Previously, he left Chu for a while in the care of the headmaster. It might not be the proper place, but only Blade and the headmaster could take care of Chu. However, Chu was not there at the moment. While taking care of Chu, the headmaster kept rubbing his head, which annoyed Chu because his beard poked her. Until evening, Blade still couldn't find Chu. When he wanted to enter his room, he heard Chu's voice from inside. Blade tried to peek a little, and he saw Chu playing with dolls. Upon closer inspection, 2 dolls she held resembled him and Arnest. But it wasn't just the 2 of them. Chu also had dolls of Sophie, Claire, Jessica, and even Leonard. What surprised Blade was that Chu also had dolls of students she didn't even know. Chu was acting with her dolls as if she had 108 friends. Blade then closed the door and stopped spying. He felt like he had failed because he didn't realize it earlier. When he passed by Arnest, Blade didn't respond and just walked with a gloomy expression. Suddenly, Blade slammed his head against the wall. Arnest didn't know what happened, but she tried to stop him. After calming Blade down, she asked for an explanation. Blade then revealed that Chu wanted to have friends, but his instinct was against it. A dragon couldn't acknowledge a creature weaker than itself. To be recognized as Chu's friend, the person had to defeat her first. Blade felt utterly useless. Arnest also understood that Blade couldn't do it alone, he should have asked for help from others. After all, Blade was willing to help Arnest before, so why didn't he seek help in return? Arnest felt it was unfair. The next day, Blade and Arnest went to the lower ranked class arena. Blade wanted to ask for their help to defeat Chu in a fight. At first, they were unsure if they could win against a dragon. However, Blade begged them, even prostrated himself, to become Chu's friend. Arnest also joined in pleading. Surprisingly, not only them, but all the students from the top-ranked class also came and begged for their help. Like Blade, they also cared for Chu. Seeing so many people pleading and prostrating themselves, the students from the lower-ranked class felt uneasy and finally decided to help. Some time later, all the students gathered in the arena to face Chu. Even the headmaster would be there to witness the battle from above the arena. He seemed very excited because he also wanted to have real training like that. However, his wife was doubtful if a dragon would admit defeat when fighting against so many humans. According to the headmaster, dragons considered humans as creatures that exerted their power in groups. For him, fighting in a group was not considered cowardly. The dragon thought the same way. Although the headmaster was enthusiastic about the fight, he was a little disappointed because he wouldn't see Blade in action. Of course, Blade wouldn't participate in the battle since he had already defeated Chu. Before the fight began, Blade tried to encourage Chu. He heard that Chu was trapped when captured before, so she didn't have a chance to fight properly. But this time, it was a fair fight. Blade wanted to show the true power of humans and also the true power of dragons. This is the end of episode 3. Continuing to episode 4, as the battle began, most of the students immediately ran away upon seeing Chu's fiery explosion. However, Arnest scolded them to maintain the special formation as planned. This reinvigorated their spirits upon hearing Arnest's words. The forces led by Clay and Kasim converged to create a defensive formation with shields to counter Chu. When Chu attempted to attack one of the forces with his tail, they dispersed to avoid the assault, but this left Chu's rear vulnerable, giving the other force an opportunity to strike. So far, everything was going exactly like their training. The headmaster, observing the battle, was also impressed with their strategy of exploiting Chu's blind spot. However, defeating a dragon wasn't going to be as simple as that. Chu's scales were impervious to ordinary attacks. For now, their priority was to heal the injured students. Meanwhile, the attacking forces waited for the right moment to make their move against Chu. When the opportunity arose, Sophie leapt towards Chu to strike his head, while Arnest used her sword to unleash a fiery attack. Although the attack seemed to have some effect, it was uncertain if it would be enough to defeat Chu. As it turned out, Arnest's recent attack was not their main objective. Due to the smoke from the flames, Chu was unable to see his surroundings clearly, and suddenly, the ground beneath him collapsed as he tried to move. They had set a trap for him. The headmaster doubted Blade's intention to show a fair fight. Blade argued that it would indeed be unfair if the trap was set before the battle began. However, the trap was created right after the battle commenced. Throughout the fight, the other students were merely buying time for Leonard to dig the trap quickly. Nonetheless, the headmaster wasn't convinced that such a plan alone could lead them to victory. Blade understood this, and from this point on, the real battle would begin. The healed students now launched another attack on Chu. Meanwhile, for some reason, Asmodeus within Arnest's sword seemed to be struggling to continuously release flames. Nevertheless, Arnest paid no heed and forced Asmodeus to keep producing the flames. Chu then attempted to escape from the trap, but Arnest blocked his path with the forcibly unleashed fire from Asmodeus. Due to Arnest's attack, Chu fell from the sky. Sophie seized the opportunity to use her created hero power of gravity manipulation to further strike him down with force. Finally, Arnest would finish him off with her finishing blow. However, this attack was not solely Arnest's doing. The other students channeled their magic energy to strengthen her. Not only the top-ranking students but also those from lower ranks did the same. They shared the same feelings, wanting to become Chu's friends. The tremendous and powerful flames were directed by Arnest towards Chu, leaving him no chance to evade. After being hit by the attack, Chu reverted to his human form. He appeared somewhat sad for losing and felt that he had disappointed Blade by being a weak child. However, Blade certainly didn't see it that way. Chu's words weren't true, it wasn't Chu who was weak, but humans were stronger. With that, Chu finally acknowledged that they were stronger. This meant that now they could be his friends. Initially, Chu had arrogantly tried to befriend them to cover up his embarrassment, but after Blade's admonition, Chu sincerely wished to be friends with them. The next day, the headmaster was overseeing the construction of new facilities in the arena. He was pleased with the students' progress and wanted to prepare combat training that simulated real-life conditions. Using the lost magical knowledge called science, he planned to create a virtual reality facility. Meanwhile, Chu was having a meal with Blade and their friends. Claire was feeding Chu, playfully teasing her. During the meal, Blade noticed a change in Arnest. Somehow, Arnest had become chubby. The others had already noticed it, but they didn't mention it directly. Blade, on the other hand, bluntly called her chubby without considering Arnest's feelings. Arnest felt embarrassed and ran away from the cafeteria. Blade couldn't understand why the others thought he was being mean. They said that maybe Arnest had dumped Blade. Since then, Arnest had locked herself in her room for 3 days. Blade was visibly distressed about the situation, interpreting dumped as Arnest not wanting to be friends anymore. Jessica worsened the situation by saying that dumped actually meant Arnest no longer wanted to be friends with Blade. Hearing this, Blade panicked. He still wanted to be Arnest's friend and planned to apologize. However, Claire believed that Blade didn't know why Arnest was angry with him, and if he apologized without understanding the reason, Arnest might get even more upset. So, Claire, Jessica, and Sophie decided to accompany him to Arnest's room. Chu and Leonard joined them as well. When they arrived at Arnest's door, Jessica tried knocking and informed her that Blade came to apologize. But they received no response. Reluctantly, Jessica used a lockpick to force open the door. Once inside, they heard Arnest crying in the dimly lit room. They turned on the lights and saw Arnest devouring donuts greedily. Arnest explained that she had been feeling extremely hungry since her battle with Chu the other day. That was the first time she tried donuts, and she had been addicted ever since. Blade, still worried, asked if Arnest had dumped him, but it turned out that was not her intention. She just didn't want to show her body like this to him. Blade felt relieved to know he wasn't dumped. Rather carelessly, he decided to leave as if all the problems were solved. Claire and Jessica tried to encourage Blade to at least say something encouraging to Arnest. However, Blade, not fully understanding the situation, praised the deliciousness of the donuts. In this situation, Claire and Jessica handed it over to Leonard to set an example. Despite Leonard's well-put words, Arnest was still upset because he called her chubby. Blade made another attempt, advising that the issue could be resolved with the help of their friends. Blade planned to train Arnest's body back to its slim form. The next day, they started with a morning run. Right from the start, Arnest struggled to keep up. Nevertheless, she persisted, hoping to burn calories. They followed it up with squats, pull-ups, and push-ups. During the lunch break, Claire and Jessica prepared a special diet meal for Arnest, consisting of half a boiled egg, a slice of meat, and 2 broccoli pieces. Arnest needed to cut down on her calorie intake. After all the exercises, Arnest took a hot shower and then weighed herself. Unfortunately, her weight didn't decrease. However, she had been training to gain muscle mass, and soon she might start losing weight. The next day, Arnest had an extreme idea. To be safe, they carried it out in a new training area with strong magic barriers, so there would be no damage if the plan failed. Blade accompanied her as a precaution, and if everything went as planned, Arnest asked him to praise her. With that, Arnest began chanting a spell to awaken the power of Asmodeus. A fire tornado engulfed her, and slowly, Arnest's body began to slim down. Sophie, Chu, Claire, and Jessica rushed to the scene, concerned about the massive flames. They wanted to save Arnest, but Blade urged them to trust her. Shortly after, Arnest regained control. However, she now had horns and some fire-related attributes on her body. Suddenly, Asmodeus spoke through her. He was proud that Arnest could achieve this form. Previously, only first-generation users could accomplish it. The destroyed parts of Arnest's body transformed into fire, empowered by Asmodeus. Her body became immortal and impervious to physical attacks. Asmodeus was eager to find enemies to burn with its power. However, Arnest replied that the fire was better used to burn her fat. She did it as part of her diet to burn calories. Though feeling her dignity had been trampled upon, Asmodeus couldn't deny the truth. The weakness of the demon form was its high energy consumption. To sustain this form, 1 million calories per hour were needed. Arnest was delighted because she no longer needed to exercise every day to burn calories. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and collapsed. It turned out Arnest was just hungry. She was so famished that even in her demon form, she became unruly and even grew a tail. Claire tried to encourage her not to lose herself in the demon form. Surprisingly, Arnest could still remember Claire's name. Not only that, Arnest wanted to eat Claire because she looked delicious. Arnest started approaching Claire on her hands and feet. In such a situation, Blade had no choice but to use some force. He unleashed the 3-sword dragon vanish technique, the wind version, to revert Arnest to her original form. When she woke up, Arnest found herself naked and being carried by Blade. As promised, Blade praised her for successfully executing her plan. That night, Blade, Sophie, Claire, Jessica, and Leonard visited Arnest's room to check on her condition. To their surprise, they found Arnest devouring donuts in a brutal manner. Blade had somewhat expected this. Arnest tried to convince them to let her eat the donuts, as she would slim down again after using her demon form. However, they regarded it as an excuse of someone who was lazy. Arnest still insisted on sticking to her method. This is the end of episode 4. Continuing to episode 5, Nurse Ukes is examining Blade's condition. The results are fairly decent, around 30%. Blade asks if it means he can use his powers at around 30%. As it turns out, no, it means Blade is likely to die if he uses his powers at 30%. After the examination, Claire summons Blade while he's walking through the school hallway. Besides Claire, there's a fair-haired girl wearing glasses. Her name is Maria. Blade actually remembers the girl. Maria was on the magic team when they fought against Chu. He remembers that Maria often stumbled during practice and produced peculiar fireballs. Unbeknownst to Blade, he had caused Maria to lose her confidence. Worse yet, Blade referred to her as a clumsy kid. Setting that aside, Maria seems to want to ask for Blade's help. And unexpectedly, Maria asks Blade to kill her. Maria is currently taken to the cafeteria to explain the deeper meaning of her request. Apparently, Maria wants Blade to kill her when she can't control herself. In reality, Maria is not human. Blade had suspected that Maria is a night demon. Within Maria, there's a fearsomely powerful demon, a separate entity from her. This entity appeared once when Maria was in a difficult situation. Suddenly, the teacup she was holding shattered. That's what happens if she misjudges her strength. Until now, Maria had been able to control it, but since the battle against Chu, she's been struggling. Blade theorizes that her demon's power will surge uncontrollably when she's highly spirited in combat. In other words, if left unchecked, a demon will manifest from within her. However, Maria has no place other than this academy. Maria graduated from Rosewood Middle School, just like Claire. She doesn't know her parents. She doesn't even have a home to return to. Therefore, Maria wants to overcome the power within her. Blade agrees to help her, understanding the feeling of not having parents. It's not just him. Sophie, Arnest, Claire, Jessica, Cassim, Clay, Leonard, and even Chu are willing to assist. Later in the afternoon, they all headed to the battle arena. Blade asked Claire and Jessica to infiltrate the control room to adjust the demon power resistant walls to their maximum strength. This way, the power that Maria had been holding back could be fully unleashed. Nevertheless, Maria still hesitated to do it. Blade informed her that this method had proven successful with Arnest. Arnest herself convinced Maria to follow Blade's plan, even though she admitted it was a foolish plan. Blade and Arnest then playfully teased each other about their foolishness. Seeing their interaction, Maria decided to trust her friends. Afterward, Maria removed the seals from her right hand. With that one object, she could release half of her power. Then, she did the same with her left hand. Not only there, she also had the same objects on her right and left legs. Maria's current strength increased 16-fold. Lastly, she revealed a pendant she was wearing. She claimed it was her strongest seal. The pendant could weaken her to 1/10 of her power. If she removed the pendant, Maria would become 160 times stronger. As she removed it, Maria couldn't contain the entity that emerged from within her. The being before them resembled Maria, but had horns and a pair of wings. Its voice became deeper. It also bore a mark on its forehead. Blade recognized the mark as that of a demon king. Before long, Arnest transformed into her demon form and fought against Maria. Unfortunately, Arnest was easily tossed aside with a simple wave of Maria's hand. Leonard's attempted attack proved futile as well. Next, Sophie used her custom hero power, ultimate gravity, to bring Maria down. Sophie immediately fainted after exerting such immense power. However, this provided an opportunity for Chu to unleash a tremendously powerful fire. Yet, Maria absorbed the fire and redirected it back at Chu. Finally, only Blade remained. At first, Blade attacked with an unsheathed sword. However, it seemed he couldn't win unless he took the fight seriously. When Blade unsheathed his sword and attacked Maria, the sword wasn't strong enough and almost cracked. Maria retaliated, emitting a laser as hot as the sun. Blade managed to withstand it, but the sword he was using ended up shattered. Unsteadily, Arnest urged Blade to use his sword, Asmodeus. With that, Blade decided to end the battle in a single strike. He gathered such immense power that even Asmodeus wasn't sure if it could contain it. The slash from Blade's attack had an extraordinary effect. Maria hadn't anticipated her protector cracking, and she was ultimately defeated by the strike. After using that final attack, Blade felt his body weaken and suddenly he lost consciousness. Once Blade had regained consciousness, he found himself in the school's infirmary. The nurse was deeply concerned about him. Blade had briefly died, and had the treatment been delayed even a bit, he might not have been saved. Seeing the nurse so distraught, Blade promised not to push himself that hard again. Meanwhile, the other friends weren't severely injured, including Maria. However, there was one notable difference: Maria still retained her demonic form. When she encountered Blade, she referred to him as a hero, which raised his suspicions about her true nature. Blade quickly tried to hush her and asked her not to discuss it. Suddenly, he revealed that Maria and himself were different people. He didn't even know his own name, as he had never been given one. Yet, other students who met him called him Mao. Afterwards, Blade and his friends went to the principal's office seeking an explanation. It turned out that he was the one who brought Maria to the academy. He also knew her true identity. Maria's mother was a human who had unfortunately passed away. As for her father, the principal was unsure if he was still alive or not, but he knew who he was, the Demon King. This meant that Maria was the child of the Demon King. After absorbing this information, they encountered Mao, who was chatting with other students in the garden. They were a bit concerned about letting Mao roam freely. However, Mao mentioned that he was interested in attending school. As the bell rang, Mao left for class. After Mao left, Claire asked why Maria hadn't appeared again, and only Mao was present. She worried that she might never be able to meet Maria again. During the night, Blade heard a knocking sound on his window. As expected, Mao was waiting outside. He mentioned that he wanted to take Blade on a date, having heard about it from his classmates. Blade was still uncertain, but suddenly, Mao lifted Blade into the air. Curious, Blade inquired about Mao's age. He felt that Mao seemed to lack a lot of knowledge. Mao responded that he became aware of his existence 5 years ago. However, for demons, age isn't relevant. Furthermore, as a woman, she disliked being treated like a child. Nevertheless, Blade still didn't see her as a woman, even though Mao was obsessively infatuated with him. He couldn't understand why Mao was so fixated on him. What's clear is that Mao had decided to leave once she killed Blade. Additionally, Mao informed Blade that she couldn't simply remove her pendant. Within her, there was the consciousness of Maria who resisted. Maria was currently hiding in the depths of her heart. Within her heart was a whirlpool of darkness. Since childhood, she had been shunned and hated by humans. She continued to hide and survive with just her mother. Her mother believed in her father, but not Maria. When her mother passed away, Maria's heart shattered with doubt. She questioned her father's love for her mother and blamed her suffering on him. Thus, Mao was born as a way to escape all those painful emotions. A few days later, a short bespectacled girl informed them that she had looked into the information about Maria's pendant. Apparently, the pendant wasn't an item for sealing. Either way, the girl's name was Eliza. Despite that, Mao felt that her power was restricted by the pendant. Eliza hadn't fully analyzed it, but she speculated that the pendant might function as a recording device. It could possibly contain a message from someone. According to Maria's memories, the item was a memento from her mother. Eliza mentioned that the recording held a message that could help Maria. In other words, a way to remove Mao, the Demon King. Following this, they decided to play the recording within the pendant. Claire felt that Mao didn't need to disappear to be replaced by Maria. However, Mao said that one of them was indeed destined to vanish. After Eliza prepared the pendant, Mao opened it to reveal a projection of her father, the Demon King. He conveyed a message to Amelia, Maria's mother. The Demon King apologized for leaving her and didn't mind being hated. He had a duty to fight his enemies, but he didn't want Amelia involved in bloodshed. Not for any particular reason, but he had his motives. Perhaps Amelia hadn't realized it, but the Demon King knew she was carrying his child. He had names prepared, whether it was a boy or a girl. If a boy, Orthus. If a girl, Maria. The Demon King asked Amelia to convey something when the child was capable of understanding. Tell them their father had passed away. The Demon King swore that he always loved Amelia and their future child. After the recording ended, Mao shed tears. She could no longer control her body. It seemed she was losing in the battle of souls. Mao had come to accept that she would be defeated by Maria. She requested them to call out Maria's name so she could return. Once called, the tearful figure before them was none other than Maria. At the end of the episode, it appeared that Blade was about to engage in a battle with Maria in the arena. Suddenly, Maria removed her glasses, and in an instant, her form transformed into Mao. It turned out that Mao's personality hadn't vanished. Perhaps because Maria wanted to coexist with her. This is the end of episode 5. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss part 6 of this series recap.